We all face trouble in life. Whether we want to admit it or not, it's a universal experience. It doesn't matter how strong or successful you are. There comes a time when life feels overwhelming. Maybe you've been there, or maybe you're there right now. It could be that you've just lost a loved one. Perhaps you're struggling with your health or facing a mountain of debt. The challenges could be in your family, your marriage, or even in your own heart, with silent battles no one else sees. Whatever form it takes, trouble will come. But here's the beauty of it. God knew we would face trouble. He knew that we, in our human limitations, would find ourselves in situations where we have no answers, no strength left to fight. And because He knew this, He gave us an invitation, a simple yet powerful invitation, to call upon Him in the time of trouble. The question I want to ask you today is this: where do you turn when trouble comes? Do you try to handle it on your own? Do you retreat, thinking you can fix it with your strength, wisdom, or resources? Or do you reach out for help in all the wrong places, hoping that the world will give you solutions? Beloved, I want you to hear this clearly. The solution to your trouble, the answer to your distress, is not found in the world. It's found in God. Psalm 50 verse 15 says, "Call on me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you will honor me." This is not a suggestion. This is a promise. God Himself is saying, when you are in trouble, call on me. When the burden is too heavy, call on me. When you don't know what to do, call on me. Now, I want you to think about the God who is inviting you to call upon Him. This is not a distant God who is indifferent to your pain. This is the Creator of the heavens and the earth. This is the God who split the Red Sea and shut the mouths of lions. This is the same God who raised Jesus from the dead. And this same God is saying, call on me. Why? Because He is able to deliver. He is able to save. He is able to take what the enemy meant for evil and turn it around for your good. But here's the key, my dear friend. His power can only manifest in your situation when you call upon Him. When you lift your voice and cry out to God, you are acknowledging that you cannot do it on your own. You are inviting His limitless power into your limited situation. It's in that moment of surrender, when you say, God, I need you, that heaven begins to move on your behalf. Let me share with you the words from Psalm 34 verse 17. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. Do you see the heart of God in this? He doesn't just hear you when you call, He delivers you. He moves to rescue you from the trouble that surrounds you. Maybe you're thinking, but will God really hear me? Will He really come through for me? The answer is a resounding yes. God is not a man that He should lie. He has never failed, and He never will. But He is waiting for you to call upon Him. There's a story of a young man who was facing a storm in his life, a situation so dire that he had no idea how to move forward. Everything he tried in his own strength seemed to fail, and every solution he sought from others only made the situation worse. One night, in sheer desperation, he cried out to God, Lord, I don't know what to do, but I trust that you do. Help me. It was a simple prayer, but it was a prayer of surrender. In that moment, God began to work in ways that the young man could not have imagined. Doors opened, relationships were restored, and peace flooded his heart. That young man learned a powerful lesson. When we reach the end of ourselves, that's where God begins. But it starts with us calling on Him. There's something powerful about calling upon God. When you lift your voice and cry out to the Almighty, you're not just speaking empty words into the air. You're activating divine power. God moves when His children call on Him in faith. His intervention comes when we acknowledge our dependence on Him. Let me remind you of this incredible truth. God's power is available to us, but it often waits for our call. Think about it for a moment. The Creator of the universe, the one who spoke the stars into existence, the one who holds all things together, has all power. Yet, there are moments in life when we don't experience that power simply because we haven't asked for it. we haven't called upon him. Isaiah 65 verse 24 gives us a glimpse into God's heart when it says, "Before they call, I will answer. While they are still speaking, I will hear." Can you imagine that? God is so ready, so willing, and so eager to respond to you that even before you finish uttering the words, he's already working on your behalf. That is how much he cares about you. But here's the thing. While God is ready to answer, he still waits for us to call. He waits for us to cry out and say, "God, I need you." You see, calling upon God is an act of faith. It's an act of surrender. It's saying, "God, I've come to the end of myself, and now I need you to step in." In Jeremiah 33 verse 3, God says, "Call to me, and I will answer you, and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know." What a promise! When you call on God, he doesn't just give you answers. He gives you great and unsearchable things. He shows you solutions and ways out of your trouble that you could never have imagined on your own. His wisdom is beyond our understanding, and his power is beyond our limitations. Let me ask you, are you facing a situation today where you need great and unsearchable things? Are you in a place where no human wisdom can provide the answer, where your strength is not enough to break through? Then the invitation to call upon God is for you. Let me take you to a powerful story in 1 Kings 18, the story of Elijah on Mount Carmel. Elijah was a prophet living in a time when the people of Israel had turned away from God. They were worshiping Baal, a false god, and had forgotten the power of the living God. So, Elijah called for a showdown. He invited the prophets of Baal to gather on Mount Carmel and see whose God would answer by fire. Now, picture the scene. 450 prophets of Baal are calling on their God from morning till noon. They shout, they dance, they cut themselves, but nothing happens. There was no power. There was no answer. But when Elijah, the lone prophet of the true God, stepped forward and called upon the Lord, something miraculous happened. He simply prayed, "Answer me, Lord, answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." 1 Kings 18 verse 37. And what happened? Fire fell from heaven. The altar was consumed, and the people fell on their faces and declared, "The Lord, he is God." What was the difference? The prophets of Baal were calling on a God who had no power, but Elijah was calling on the God of all power, the God who hears and responds when his people call. This is the God you are calling on today, the God who answers by fire, the God who can turn the impossible into reality. When you call upon him, his power begins to work in your situation in ways that are beyond human explanation. Matthew 7 verses 7 to 8 reminds us of this promise. "Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives. The one who seeks finds. And to the one who knocks, the door will be opened." God is not distant, and he's not deaf to your cries. He's listening, and he's ready to respond. But you have to ask. You have to knock. You have to call. You see, when you ask, it's not just a ritual or a religious exercise. It's an expression of your trust in God's ability and his willingness to help you. Maybe you've been facing a closed door for a long time. Maybe you've been knocking, but it feels like nothing is happening. I want to encourage you today. Keep knocking. Keep calling. God is faithful, and his power is still at work, even when you don't see immediate results. As we've talked about the power that is released when we call upon God, I want to take a moment to reflect on the other side of that coin. What happens when we don't call on God? What happens when we rely on our own strength, our own wisdom, and our own understanding? What happens when we try to handle the storms of life without inviting God into the process? It's a sobering thought, isn't it? The truth is, we've all been there. There have been moments in our lives when we try to do it all by ourselves. We told ourselves we were strong enough, smart enough, or capable enough to figure things out. and maybe for a while it seemed to work, but eventually we hit a wall. Eventually, we realize that we can only go so far in our human strength. That's when we begin to feel the weight of the world on our shoulders. That's when the pressure becomes too much to bear. You see, when we refuse to call on God, we are essentially telling Him, I don't need you. We are choosing self-reliance over divine assistance. But here's the reality, my friends. We are not built to carry life's burdens alone. God designed us to live in fellowship with Him, to lean on His strength, and to trust in His wisdom. When we reject that, we end up carrying weights that were never meant for us. Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6 gives us a clear instruction. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to Him, and He will make your paths straight. Notice what it says. Don't lean on your own understanding. Don't try to figure everything out by yourself. Submit to God, and He will make your path straight. When we try to navigate life's troubles without God, we become like a ship lost at sea without a compass. We drift from one solution to another, hoping that something will work, but never truly finding peace. It's like building a house on sand. No matter how hard you work, the foundation is weak, and when the storms come, it all crumbles. Look at what the prophet Hosea says in Hosea 7 verse 14. They do not cry out to me from their hearts, but wail on their beds. How many times have we found ourselves in that place? Lying awake at night, worrying, crying, or wailing over our troubles. We toss and turn, we stress and fret, but we never actually cry out to God. We never bring our problems to the one who can solve them. And as a result, we remain stuck, overwhelmed by the weight of our struggles. What happens when we don't call upon God? We miss out on His help. We miss out on His deliverance. God is willing and able to help us, but He will not force His way into our lives. He's waiting for us to invite Him in. When we refuse to call on Him, we're shutting the door on the very power that can save us. Think about the story of King Saul in the Old Testament. Saul was the first king of Israel, chosen by God to lead His people. But as time went on, Saul began to drift away from God. Instead of seeking God's guidance, he relied on his own judgment. One of the most tragic moments in Saul's life came when he faced a great battle with the Philistines. Instead of calling on God for help, Saul sought out a medium, a witch, hoping to hear a word from the dead prophet Samuel. He was so desperate for guidance, but instead of calling on the living God, he turned to forbidden sources. What happened to Saul? His reign ended in failure. He was defeated, and his life ended in tragedy. All because he refused to seek God's help. He refused to call on the one who had the power to deliver him. He leaned on his own understanding, and it led to his downfall. Friends, I don't share this to bring fear or condemnation. I share this as a loving warning. We are not meant to go through life without God. We are not meant to face battles in our own strength. When we don't call upon God, we expose ourselves to defeat. We open the door to fear, anxiety, and hopelessness. But here's the good news. It's never too late to call upon God. It doesn't matter how long you've been trying to do it on your own. It doesn't matter how far you've drifted or how overwhelmed you feel. The moment you call on God, His power is available to you. The moment you surrender your burden to Him, He steps in to fight your battle. Remember what Jesus said in Matthew 11 verse 28. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. This is God's heart for you. He doesn't want you to carry your burdens alone. He wants you to come to Him, to cry out to Him, and to let Him give you rest. You might be thinking, but I've been trying to handle this for so long. I've already made so many mistakes. But hear me clearly. God's grace is greater than your mistakes. His mercy is new every morning, and He is ready to step into your situation the moment you call on Him. I want to leave you with one powerful truth. God honors persistence. It's easy to call upon God once, but what happens when the answer doesn't come immediately? What do we do when it seems like God is silent or when the breakthrough seems delayed? This is where the power of persistent prayer comes in. The Bible is filled with examples of people who refused to give up, people who kept calling upon God even when it seemed like nothing was happening. They understood that God's timing is perfect and that his answers often come after a season of waiting. Persistence in prayer isn't about convincing God to do something. It's about strengthening our faith, building our trust, and showing our dependence on him. One of the most powerful illustrations of persistent prayer comes from the parable that Jesus shared in Luke 18 verses 1 to 8. In this parable, Jesus tells the story of a widow who kept coming to an unjust judge, pleading for justice. This judge didn't fear God or care about people, but because the widow was so persistent, he finally gave in and granted her request. Jesus then says, "And will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones, who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly." Jesus told this parable to show us that we should always pray and never give up. Think about that for a moment. God is not like the unjust judge. He is a loving Father who delights in hearing from his children. So if an unjust judge can be moved by persistence, how much more will our compassionate, faithful God respond when we continue to seek him? Persistent prayer moves the heart of God. It doesn't mean we are trying to change his mind, but it does mean that we are showing him our faith. We are showing him that we believe he is our only source of help, and in his perfect timing, God answers. But we must be willing to keep knocking, to keep asking, to keep seeking. One story that always inspires me when I think about persistence is the story of Elijah on Mount Carmel. You may remember this story from 1 Kings 18. It was a time of great drought in Israel. There had been no rain for 3 years, but God had promised Elijah that rain would come. So Elijah went up to the top of Mount Carmel, and there he prayed. He bowed down with his face between his knees and prayed for rain. But when Elijah finished praying the first time, what happened? Nothing. No clouds. No rain. Nothing changed. Did Elijah give up? No. He sent his servant to look toward the sea and check for any sign of rain. The servant went and came back saying, "There is nothing there." Now, most of us might have been discouraged at that point. We might have thought, well, I prayed and nothing happened. Maybe God isn't going to answer this time. But Elijah didn't stop. He prayed again. He sent his servant again, and still nothing. 6 times Elijah prayed. 6 times the servant came back with the same report. There's nothing. But Elijah didn't let that discourage him. He kept calling upon God. He knew that God's promise was sure. He knew that rain was coming, even if he couldn't see it yet. So he prayed a 7th time. And after that 7th prayer, the servant came back and said, "I see a cloud as small as a man's hand rising from the sea." It was just a small cloud, a tiny sign of what was to come. But that was enough. Elijah knew that God was answering his prayer. And soon, the sky grew dark, the winds rose, and a heavy rain began to fall, drenching the land that had been dry for so long. This story teaches us a profound lesson about the power of persistence. Sometimes when we call upon God, it seems like nothing is happening. We pray once, twice, maybe even 6 times, and we don't see any change. But what if Elijah had given up after the 6th prayer? What if he had stopped believing just before the breakthrough? He would have missed the miracle. The key to his victory was his refusal to stop praying. I believe this is a word for someone listening today. You've been calling upon God for a long time. You've been praying for a breakthrough, but it seems like nothing is happening. You're on the verge of giving up. But let me encourage you, don't stop praying. Don't stop believing. Your breakthrough might be just around the corner. Like Elijah, you might be on the verge of seeing that small cloud, the first sign that God is about to pour out his blessings on your life. Let's not forget the story of the Canaanite woman in Matthew 15 verses 21 to 28. This woman came to Jesus, pleading for her daughter's healing. At first, Jesus didn't respond to her, and when he finally spoke, he said, "It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." That must have been a hard thing to hear, but this woman was desperate. She didn't let anything stop her. She replied, "Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." What faith! Jesus was moved by her persistence and faith, and he healed her daughter right there. Her story shows us that even when the answer seems delayed, even when it feels like God isn't responding, persistence can move the hand of God. Her determination and faith resulted in her daughter's healing. She didn't give up, and neither should we. Galatians 6 verse 9 tells us, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." There's always a harvest coming when we persist in faith. The question is, will we endure long enough to see it? If you're feeling weary today, if you've been calling on God and haven't seen the answer yet, let me encourage you with these words. God has heard every prayer. He has seen every tear. He is working even when you can't see it. Sometimes the delay is not denial, it's preparation. God is aligning things in your favor. He's strengthening your faith. He's building your character. And at just the right time, He will come through for you in a way that will amaze you. Think of the promise in Isaiah 40 verse 31. "But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint." God is not just giving you the answer you're praying for. He is renewing your strength as you wait. He is preparing you to soar above the storm, to run the race without growing weary. So, my friends, the message today is simple. Don't give up. Keep calling upon God. Keep knocking on the door. Keep trusting Him, even when you don't see immediate results. You might be in the waiting room of life right now, but God's answer is on the way. His timing is perfect, and He will not fail you. If you're in a season of delay, remember that delay is not denial. God's promises are sure, and His power is available to those who persist. Just like Elijah saw the rain after 7 prayers, just like the Canaanite woman saw her daughter healed, you will see God's deliverance in your life if you don't give up. As we reach the final section of today's message, I want to talk about something that can be both beautiful and challenging: God's perfect timing. Sometimes we call upon God, and the answer doesn't come when we expect it. We wait, we pray, and we wonder, "God, where are you?" But one thing I've learned over the years is that God's timing is never too early and never too late. It is always perfect. The Bible tells us in Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11, "He has made everything beautiful in its time." This verse is so simple, yet it holds a profound truth. God's plans for our lives are set to unfold in His perfect time. Not in our time, not according to our schedule, but according to His divine wisdom. And here's the beautiful part. When the time comes, what God does will be nothing short of beautiful. Consider the story of Abraham and Sarah. They had been given a promise from God, one that seemed impossible. God told them that they would have a son, even though they were old and well past the age of childbearing. Year after year passed and still no child, but God's promise remained. He had spoken it, and it was only a matter of time before it would come to pass. Now, I imagine that there were days when Abraham and Sarah doubted. There must have been moments of frustration, moments when they questioned, "God, you said we would have a son, but where is he? Why is this taking so long?" Yet, in the midst of their waiting, God was working. He was preparing them for the promise. And when the time was right, Sarah conceived and gave birth to Isaac. God's timing was perfect. It wasn't when they expected, but it was exactly when it needed to happen. Isaac was not just a child. He was the fulfillment of God's covenant, the beginning of a great nation through which all the world would be blessed. Had Abraham and Sarah received the promise too early or in their own timing, it would not have unfolded in the way God intended. Maybe today, you're waiting for God to answer your prayer. Maybe you're in a season where it feels like nothing is happening. You've called upon God, but the breakthrough hasn't come. You've prayed for healing, but the illness lingers. You've asked for provision, but the financial struggle continues. I want to encourage you today. God's delay is not a denial. Just because the answer hasn't come yet doesn't mean it's not coming. Isaiah 55 verses 8-9 reminds us that for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. God's ways are higher. His timing is wiser. He sees the bigger picture that we cannot see. He knows exactly when to release His blessing, when to bring healing, and when to open the door of opportunity. I want to share a personal story about a woman who was praying for a job. She had been searching for months, sending out applications, going to interviews, but nothing seemed to work out. Each time she thought she had found the right opportunity, it would fall through. She began to feel discouraged and wondered, God, are you even hearing my prayers? Why is this taking so long? But she kept calling upon God. She kept praying, even when she didn't see the answer. Months later, a door finally opened. She received a job offer, one that was better than any of the other opportunities she had applied for. It was closer to her home, with better pay and benefits, and it allowed her to use her gifts in ways she had never imagined. Looking back, she realized that if she had been offered any of the other jobs she had prayed for earlier, she would have missed out on this perfect opportunity. Sometimes, God closes doors not because He is denying us, but because He is protecting us. He knows what is best for us, and His timing is always perfect. The delay was necessary because God had something greater in store for her. And today, I want you to know that God has something greater in store for you too. When we learn to trust God's timing, we begin to see life from a different perspective. We stop worrying about when the answer will come, and we start trusting that God is working behind the scenes. Even when we can't see it, He is preparing things to fall into place. Remember the story of Lazarus in John 11. Lazarus, a close friend of Jesus, had fallen ill. His sisters, Mary and Martha, sent word to Jesus, asking Him to come quickly. But instead of rushing to Lazarus' side, Jesus stayed where he was for 2 more days. By the time he arrived, Lazarus had been dead for 4 days. It seemed like Jesus had come too late. But what the people didn't realize was that Jesus was about to reveal something even greater than a healing. He was about to demonstrate the power of resurrection. When Jesus called Lazarus out of the grave, He showed that God's power is not limited by our human understanding of time. What seemed like a delay was actually part of God's greater plan to show His glory in an even more miraculous way. This is the same God we serve today. He may not answer your prayer when you expect it, but when He does, it will be greater than you ever imagined. He is never late, He is always on time. Habakkuk 2 verse 3 says, "For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry." God has an appointed time for every promise, every answer, every breakthrough. It will not come a moment too soon or a moment too late. It will come in God's perfect time. Let me encourage you today to hold on to your faith. Keep calling upon God. Keep trusting that He is faithful to His word. In Numbers 23:19, we are reminded that God is not a man, that He should lie, nor a son of man, that He should change His mind. Does He speak and then not act? Does He promise and not fulfill? God always keeps His promises. His word will not return void. What He has spoken over your life, He will bring to pass. As we close, remember this: God's delays are not denials. He is preparing something beautiful for you. His timing is perfect, and his faithfulness is sure. When you call upon him, he hears you. He has already set the answer in motion, and when the time is right, you will see his hand move in ways you never expected. Trust in his timing, even when it's hard. Hold on to his promises, even when the wait is long, because in the end, you will discover that what God has planned for you is far greater than anything you could have imagined. So, as you wait on God, remember this: his timing is perfect, his faithfulness is unwavering, and his love for you is endless. Keep calling upon him, and in due time, you will see the beautiful things he has in store for you. Amen.